Ready, set, go.
Awesome.
Jeff Hunsunker.
Hunsunker. Yep.
Jeff Hunsunker. Welcome to NCRAW, brother.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you taking the time to come and sit down with us on a cold, little wet, frozen morning before you're going to do a presentation today?
I'm not presenting.
You're not presenting.
I organize the event. We have some other fantastic presenters, much more talented than myself, coming in to do some presentation.
You're doing exactly what you said that you weren't going to do.
Yep. But yeah, it's we're doing a training over at Western Carolina this morning on tobacco and prevention for APNC.
Who's invited?
Anybody is invited. Students, faculty, members of the public are invited. We do for continuing education credit for professionals. There's usually a charge unless they're an APNC member, then it's free.
Gotcha. That's really cool, man. I think definitely something that's much needed. What you mentioned APNC.
Mm-hmm.
What's your role with APNC? Like, what do you do?
So I got started with APNC.
And let's back it up too.
Yeah.
And like, what is APNC for like somebody that might not?
So APNC is Addiction Professionals of North Carolina. It's been a really enriching experience for me as a newer person in the field of working in addictions and recovery. I was approached by a former board member who was stepping down, and he said, "You want to be on the board?" And it's like, "Sure." And so they had a vote. They accepted me on the board to take his spot, and it's been a ride. It's taught me a lot about interacting in my community and statewide, and being a part of the movement.
Yeah. Was that kind of a surprise to have him approach you?
Yeah, it was. It was and humbling. Just like when you approached me to do this podcast. I mean, it's super humbling. It's an honor to do it, and I feel like in my recovery, for me to turn down something like that. It just doesn't go along with my values for my own recovery. If I can do something to help, then I will. Even if I didn't feel like I was worthy of the task at the time, I knew that if I just jumped in, that good things would happen.
Yeah. What's that role? Like, what kind of things do they have you doing? What?
Okay. So I'm a volunteer board member. And APNC is an organization that provides training, education, advocacy for addiction professionals and for the addiction field. And so my role is Northwestern Regional Vice President, which that means that quarterly I'm helping to organize trainings for professionals in our area.
Like what's going down today?
Yep.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily present at those, but I may secure the building and get with presenters that will come in and present some information and do the organization and registration and
a lot of the behind the scenes stuff.
Yep. Throwing the promotions out there on Facebook. So yeah,
really working it. What how'd you get to this point, man? Like
wow. How far back you want to go?
How much time do we have?
we got. So to get to this point, I guess I need to give a little backstory then. So I was a person who struggled with substance use for about 17 years. I didn't know the whole 17 years that I was struggling with substance use. Hindsight's pretty much 20/20. When I look back, I could see I lived a lot of years in what people might call denial.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I struggled. I found recovery kind of, I kind of had one of those intervention things happen with my family, and they were like, "You go to recovery, period. You go to meetings, like you're going to go, or we're going to cut you off." And so,
how old were you at that time?
Oh, I was about 20. Let's see, that was 2002. I was about 27, and really, I kind of still saw myself as different from those people. And but when I went, the first meeting I went to, 12-step meeting, I sat down. I started hearing people talk and tell their story, and I think I probably cried about 45 minutes of that meeting. I was like, oh, crap, this is me. This is exactly who I am. I do belong here.
So it made sense, that first meeting.
Yeah. And so got involved. Got pretty confident, got a little less involved, and stepped away for a while. And so that was my story for about 8 years, a little bit in and then a little bit out, and then a little bit in, a little bit out, some ups and downs and return to use and things like that. And 2010, somebody reached out to my family and said, there's this place that I think might be good for Jeff. It was a 2-year therapeutic community, really structured. Had some legal issues that were pending, and I thought, you know what, why not? I didn't want to do that. I didn't wake up one day and go, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to go live somewhere for 2 years, and but I did it, and it changed my life. It did. It turned not just my head around, but my heart too. And gave me the opportunity to really grow. Where are you
originally from?
Originally from Catawba County, Hickory. Okay. Claremont is the little bitty town in Catawba County that I grew up in.
And where was the 2-year program?
In the men's facilities in Old Fort. So the program's called Recovery Ventures Corporation. They've been in operation since 2002. I graduated that program. Today I work for that program as a therapist, and so that's really a awesome experience to be able to give back.
So many of these full circle moments.
Yeah.
Like every time somebody comes to the table, there's another one.
Yeah.
I love that, man. You, in talking on Monday night with Brandon and Ricky, one of the main the common theme that kept coming up was the transition. And the transition from being in the military to a civilian, and kind of what that process, like a lot of the work that those guys are doing is in that field. And we kind of went down the rabbit hole talking about how going from that structured 2-year program where you have all these things in place to, you know, being a person in long-term recovery, and what's next? What do you do when you get out of there? What was the transition like for you? Like,
the transition for me was long because I stayed on as a staff member.
So you were hired.
I was hired, you know, as a staff member, and when I graduated, I was working for the program.
As like a tech?
As a tech, yeah. Still living in the community, working as a tech, working my way into peer support and CSAC certifications and that kind of stuff.
Is that a part of the program to try to?
For some, you know,
for
some,
the right ones, or the ones that,
or the ones that want to pursue that. Sure, it can be. But for me, the transition wasn't really a transition out into the community. My transition came 4 years into my recovery when I came to a kind of a crossroads with my education, and I had to step out. And so for several months, I moved into one of their transitional houses because I was no longer working there. I took another job, and I was doing classes at night. So I went from community college to Mars Hill, doing their adult graduate study program. And so my transition was I went to a bunch of meetings and got a home group and got involved. And that was really awesome because by the time I moved out into my own place, I had another support group because, you know, when I moved out, I was living a pretty good distance from the facility where I had worked and where I had created a lot of relationships, so it was tough to get back there on a regular basis. So being able to create that community out in the community was essential for me.
Did you find was it difficult? Was there challenges?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember chairing a meeting one night and just like going, hey, does anybody else feel like they're super out of place here? And like they just, you know, I just have always had that feeling of just not fitting in, even though from the the outside, I think it might have looked like I was fitting in, but in here, I have that hard time. And when people with 15 and 20 years of recovery say, "Yeah, I feel like that still sometimes too."
What is it about that feeling? Because that's all of us.
Yeah, that's
us. And I did an interview with a professor here last week. He's writing a book, and that was what I kept honing in on, was what led me down that path, is I felt like I didn't fit in. But I had a ton of friends. I had played sports. I was active in sports, great family at home. It was all in here.
Yeah, same
and it
here.
wasn't out there. And I didn't know how to communicate that to anybody. I didn't know how to just get those words out. You know, and that's something that I often reflect on. Why do we feel like we don't fit in?
I don't know, because I have this deep need for connection to other people, and I think that's innate in most all of us.
But we have connection.
Yeah,
we just don't recognize it.
Maybe we're not. I don't know. I think sometimes there's moments of connection, but for me, kind of when I separate physically, sometimes that deeper feeling of connection doesn't stay with me as much, or I question it.
Is it you question the authenticity of it?
I don't know. I just question whether I fit in places, just like getting involved with APNC or going to my first conference when I was, going after that CSAC, and all these folks were in the field for 30 years. Do I even belong here? These people know all this stuff, and I know nothing. And so I had to start somewhere, though. And learning to fit in is difficult.
It's the process.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize and have interest in being more of service professionally, being taking on that role, putting on that hat, and not just doing it through your fellowship?
Yeah, so I have to go back a little bit before the last time that I got into recovery. Another time in my life, around 2008-9, I got the peer support training, so I thought I had some interest in doing it. I worked a job doing peer support for about 6 months. I ended up relapsing. I didn't take care of myself very well. And so after I relapsed and I went through that period of time, and that was right before I went to Recovery Ventures, I had felt like I wanted to do that, but then I lost it and had to do something else and struggled for a while. And so when I came to Recovery Ventures, I didn't know what I wanted. I just kind of said, I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. I'm just going to put the effort in this time. And I got some opportunities. I got an opportunity to help with doing intake coordination there, and helping newer guys come in the program while I was in the program, and taking on a leadership role within that community was instrumental in helping me to really solidify that inner need to help in a professional way.
Was that type of role something new to you?
Oh yeah,
stepping up and being a true leader and kind of.
Yeah, I kind of felt like, and I played sports in high school, and I was vocal and team captain and that kind of stuff on the football team and basketball team, and I was more of the vocal leader on the court or on the field. But at the same time, in my personal life, I never took that leadership role. In those structured environments, it was really easy for me to do that. Yeah. That felt natural to me. But in my personal life and personal relationships, I always kind of deferred the leadership to someone else. And so finding that strength or somebody else really pointing it out and encouraging that strength, I don't think I found it. I think other people really kind of pushed me to stretch myself a bit. And so I did, and it paid off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about when you decided to take it a step further and get into school?
Yeah, so as I graduated, I knew, I had been to college or back to school 3 different times. So, for different things.
Yeah. So
started out, I wanted to do sports medicine, And that's where my addiction really began, was at East Carolina University in 1993, and just kind of came home with this new habit and a terrible GPA, and so went to community college there, didn't really do very well, went back to community college, did really well, and had a relapse during a period of recovery, and had to drop out there. And these were all different. I was going to do business, and I was going to do furniture management, and then this last time I really wanted to take it slow. I wanted to really focus on me and my recovery, and so I started out with one class in a semester, and knew that I was going to do social work at this point, because I had 2 years of recovery by the time I went to school, and I was working at a program, and so I knew kind of that I had thought it out and gotten some support on where to go. And so,
was it difficult being a non-traditional student and a person in long-term recovery, walking back into the classroom, pursuing something new?
It was different, but it was actually easier.
That was at Mars Hills?
Yeah, I started at AB Tech.
Okay.
And those classes, those were fine. I didn't feel different, but being a non-traditional student, I actually went into the adult and graduate studies program at Mars Hill, so a lot of my classmates were older, or not older, but I think I was one of the oldest in the group, but we all had some experience in life, and so I was surrounded by people with some experience. But I think that my experiences in addiction, in recovery, and professionally at the time working really prepared me for school.
Yeah.
This time around, I excelled, and so that was.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Like the hardest part about going back was just walking through the door that first day. All the way from like my classmates to the faculty and staff, and like if I was, I also wear multiple hats and doing this and working part-time and different things, but if I like was committed to like being strictly a full-time student, it's not difficult. It's easy. It's not as challenge. I expected more of a challenge. Like before I walked through the door, I expected it to be more challenging, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, gosh, like.
Well, and I think some of my classmates that came from other fields into social work had more of a challenge than I did, because I had personal experience and some professional experience in the field by that time. It was, there was a big difference, because when I entered the social work program, I was 4 years in recovery and had been working in the field for a while, and so I had some experience of relating theory and that stuff to real life. When
you initially went back, and did you kind of keep your recovery and your schooling separate? Because we do a lot of stuff with like the collegiate recovery communities.
No.
Like, was there recovery stuff on campus?
There was no recovery stuff on campus, but I was telling anybody that would listen about my experiences in recovery. It was like, that was a huge part of why I got to school, and it was a huge part of why I chose social work and why I chose to be in this field. So
owned it.
I thought it was really important for me to give the folks who didn't have that experience in my program and the faculty and staff who didn't necessarily have personal experience with recovery a perspective of someone who is in recovery and is identifying in recovery, being kind of out.
So let me ask you this. In saying all that, one of the most controversial topics that always comes up on this show, and everywhere you go in recovery communities, is the conversation around stigma.
Yeah.
And in my story, in my experience, I did exactly what you did. And I completely owned it, both on campus and in my personal life, like on the street. Like if you bump into me in Walmart and we have a 5-minute conversation, it's going to be very clear that I'm a person in long-term recovery. Like that is who I am. So I haven't experienced very many effects of the stigma conversation
Yeah.
at all. Like, it's somewhat foreign to me almost, because I've like been so open and so forthcoming about it. Would you say that your experience is similar, or is there?
I would say yes, similar, because the doors that I wanted open were still opened for me, and stigma has not really affected my day-to-day per se. In my education, in my profession, I think my profession, working in recovery, it's very accepted, and so I'm kind of insulated from some of that stuff. But I will say stigma still affected me in the legal system. Stigma. So a little personal side story. Currently, my wife and I are looking into possibly doing foster parenting, and so with some legal history, not a lot, but some legal history back in the day that was related to my addiction. There's certainly some hoops I'm going to have to jump through in order to get approved. I feel like we can do that, but just feeling that stigma when they look at the paper rather than the person, it kind of
Some residual effects.
Yeah, that just it hurts a little bit in the beginning, and I get my initial response is getting defensive, and but then again, it's an opportunity to show that we do recover. It is the expectation. It's not the exception. Like, we can be productive citizens, and who better to show empathy to a biological parent and the child of a biological parent than someone who's been there.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an opportunity for education for all of us.
How do you approach somebody at Recovery Ventures, the newcomer, a client, and kind of relay that same type of message? Somebody who's carrying a lot of guilt and carrying a lot of shame. How do you teach them to think the way that you do?
Well, one, it's encouraging them that they matter, letting them know, hey, you matter. And just because your experiences up till now have said one thing, that is not who you are. Those are direct effects of having a chronic illness. And there is an answer to your chronic illness. And when that answer is implemented and you take responsibility for being a part of that, then many of those things start to subside. And then giving them the time, for me, it was about 6 months before I could actually look myself in the eye when I was brushing my teeth. You know what I mean? It took a while for that guilt and shame to go away. But I saw other people and, just wanted to model that for other people is what I want to do now. And let them know. It's possible. It's coming. Just stay the course.
Would you say that was really what changed in your multiple kind of attempts at recovery, was taking that responsibility? Yeah.
I wanted to clean up, and I wanted to look good, and I wanted everybody else to notice how well I did. And, behaviorally, it wasn't a problem to take some time, a month or 2 or 3, to be good,
Yeah.
That was pretty, that wasn't too hard. What was difficult was to change my desires, what I want, and to reconcile my values with my behaviors, because if my family and my daughter, my mom, my sisters, my family was actually important to me, then I needed to figure out a way to behave in accordance. And so kind of bringing those two things together was really key for me, and kind of trying to keep that centered all the time.
Yeah. I went through the same thing. It was like I could, be good for the 12 months that my probation officer required me to.
Yeah.
But as soon as I was off the paper, it was right back to it. And there was never any ownership, never any sense of responsibility. There was always somebody to blame.
Yeah.
And that was when it changed was when there was nobody left to blame.
Yeah.
Like the only person that I could blame was myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to take that responsibility was to own my actions and change the direction of my life by, doing the work.
I think we call that acceptance.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
And acceptance for me, I think, started with because I work the Refuge Recovery Program.
Mm-hmm.
I've been with Refuge Recovery since the beginning. And they teach, self-compassion, self-forgiveness. But it's hard when you're carrying that much guilt and you're carrying that much shame and you got that much unfinished business. And but what I learned is that I could tolerate it.
Mm-hmm.
And through building up that tolerance with that discomfort, with that guilt, with that shame, I'm feeling this way, but it's okay. I'm feeling like this right now. By doing that, by learning to tolerate it, I learned to forgive myself. I learned to be compassionate towards myself in my actions and others. So it definitely started with tolerance. Going along your story, you went back to college, going through the program,
Mm-hmm.
You went on to pursue a master's degree?
I did, yep. So last school year I completed in May I completed a Master's of Social Work at Appalachian State, which we won't tell anybody around here.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does it feel? Okay, let's back this story up a little bit. Here we are, Mr. Masters in Social Work at App State, rolling into the arch rivals campus to help co-facilitate, kind of, right? An educational program.
I mean, recovery is everywhere. Yeah. And we've got to be, no matter who our rivals are, we've got to be supportive of recovery. And we're all the same. Whether we cheer for each other on the football field's one thing, but we've got to cheer for each other when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it like getting that degree?
Man, that was a different story. Now, I did feel out of place there. I walked in the first day, and there was so many 22, 25-year-old kids, I say, because I'm a lot older than that.
I do it too every day.
And so I'm really intimidated. And these folks really know their stuff too. You can tell that this was the cream of the crop, and most of them graduated from App State's program, undergrad, and I'm coming in and I'm like, oh no, this is going to be
talk
crazy.
About not feeling like you fit in.
Yeah, and so walking around that big campus with all these young folks, around, and it's a vibrant campus, it was tough in the beginning to feel like, okay, this is a place for me. But a couple weeks in, I saw an email, some announcements, and so I was kind of looking for some stuff. While I was on campus, I had some hours in between some classes and some time that I was wanting to fill. So I was always kind of looking through the announcements of what's going on. And I saw an email right at the bottom, Collegiate Recovery Interest Meeting. And I was like, yeah, that's me. Let's go.
Did you have any prior knowledge of collegiate recovery communities at that time? Or?
I had been involved with APNC, so I had gotten a little bit of knowledge because we have a staff member who works as a liaison to Scholastic Recovery. And so I had gotten a little bit of knowledge. And when the day I walked on campus, I Googled recovery support at App State, and I got nothing. It was the Wellness and Prevention Center. And I'm like, I don't really need counseling. Right now, I just need some support to maintain. I need to find my tribe, right? And so I didn't find that immediately on campus. But when that email came up, I was like, yes, let's do it. Excuse me. I was the only student that showed up to that meeting, and I think for a few months that was kind of how it went. And but I stayed with it. I did a couple research papers on collegiate recovery. I really kind of got this idea in my head that, okay, I'm going to be a part of the beginning of their program. And so worked with their staff that was there, the interns that were working on getting this thing up and running. And by the second semester, they had established some regular meetings. Students kind of came. It, waxed and waned. And not a lot of students were sticking with it, but it was definitely a support for people to kind of drop in and get whatever they needed for the moment. And we were doing some stuff around campus to try to promote it. And by the end of the year, I think I had done 2 group projects for classes and a project on my own in another class, and just kind of related anything I could do that I could relate to the collegiate recovery communities or research for that. Then that's where I went with it. And so they're up and running. They're going, and they're moving in the right direction. They've been funded through the UNC system now to operate for at least a couple years, and they're working on sustainability. And they asked me to come back last week and talk to a group of leadership through the different departments on campus to get some awareness out there as my experience as a person in recovery on campus. And it was pretty honoring, pretty humbling, because, like a little over 8 years ago, I was riding around in my car wondering where I was going to park for the night, and getting up wondering, what I was going to take to feed my habit. And 8 years later here, I've graduated this program, and they're asking me to come back and talk to them. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
That seems to be the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge with many of these CRCs is the sustainability. And I've experienced it here, especially at a 2-year community college, because as quick as they come, they go. They're gone.
Yep.
They're graduating. They're moving on. And we're trying to work closer with Western to kind of bridge that gap. So when they do move on, that we're more of a funnel to their CRC, but who's funneling ours? Where are we? How do we continue that? And how do we find the next leader? How do we find the next Steve Steen? And that's been a lot of the work, because I'm doing my internship this semester with our CRC here.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of the work that I've been doing this semester has been more community engagement, getting out and finding potential students, finding people who might be interested, people in recovery who might not think that they can walk through that door like we did, people who are still struggling to kind of have that confidence that, hey, I can do this. Not only can I go back to college, I can have a family of support on campus, and I can thrive and succeed and make good grades. Going out and connecting with Meridian, and connecting with some folks in Cherokee, and just bringing some awareness to what we're doing on campus. But it's hard.
One thing that I thought of is we need to set up some scholarships for students, because why would a student come to any university? What would make that university more desirable than another? Well, if you offered me a scholarship, then I might get involved in that program. Some incentives sometimes, we have some incentives to get in recovery, right? We get mom off our back, or we get the law off our back, or we get our kids back. We get a job. Those are some nice incentives to get in recovery. And once I'm in recovery, why should I choose your school? Well, and that's kind of something I presented over at App State. Is we need some scholarship.
We've talked about that at a organizational level, and we're still working on bringing it to administration to see what we can do about funding. We've talked about just doing some fundraising on our own at the student level to it's affordable to go to community college. So if we could come up with $500 to $1,000 that we raised on our own and offer our scholarship to students, that's something that we've talked about.
Because especially students earlier in their recovery that may not have a lot of income, maybe non-traditional students that that are on their own, that don't have the parental support for their their finances. And then you have to answer that question on the financial aid application. Have you ever been convicted of possession? And if you answer yes, guess what?
You're out.
None. You're done. None. there's the stigma part.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we have to find a workaround until we can get some laws that will support students in recovery in that financial aid area. We're going to have to, as individual institutions or as a state, find some ways to allow students to find the funding to go to school.
That's a conversation that we have had with the administration regarding that specific question, and more like students who had a history, who like yourself, who had been in and out, and who may, because it's so rural here, a lot of them started college here, dropped out, failed out, had financial aid, and never came back, and then caught charges down the road. And so like the one thing that our administrative staff has offered, their hands are kind of tied with obviously that specific question. But one thing that they have offered specifically is, well, they offer two things. The first is that they've offered to appeal any prior history of like dropping out and not returning. Meaning like if you're on financial aid probation, if you're not allowed to receive financial aid because of your past history, you can appeal it. You can sit down in our Dean of Students office with the appeals committee, which consists of 3 people, 100% confidential conversation with just those 3 individuals. You can do exactly what you did and tell them your story. Tell them what you're doing, tell them what your goals are, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to approve you to come back.
That's huge.
They've offered that. The second piece to it, in my personal experience and in networking in the community, one of the barriers that I have experienced in talking with folks is taxes. Mm-hmm. You're rolling hard 3, 4, 5 years. You might not have filed taxes.
That's true.
For a number of years. I think when I left my treatment center, after I filled out my application to come to SCC, I had to file 4 or 5 years of taxes. And I got a check for like $3,000, and so, and it's not just that, but it's the legwork, right? I worked at, Subway for 6 months. How do I find that W-2 from 2012? So again, we've brought that to the administration about helping folks do basic tax prep. Because it's like, well, how do I do this? Where do I start? And so again, they've offered to, through their accounting department on campus, they've offered free tax prep.
Man, that's crazy.
Those are just the things that we've brought to the table this semester, really because I've been in the community and I've been hearing these stories and I've been talking to folks on a regular basis. Like, what is preventing you from coming back into school? I just did it like 2 years ago. Look where we're at now. And those were like the 2 things was the taxes, and then like dropping out while you had financial aid and being on like academic probation or whatever and not being able to get it. So I tell you, they're trying. They're really trying here. But how do we
spread that out?
Spread that nationally. Like there's so many individuals. Like you hear all this 75,000 overdoses and overdose deaths in 2017, and I really think, man, I'm really thinking that within the next like 2 or 3 years, because of the work guys like yourself are doing, and because of the awareness and the conversations that we're having, there's going to be an influx of students and people in recovery seeking an education. And we have to have these supports in place. They're going to need it, but there's going to, just as many as there's 75,000 overdoses last year, there's going to be 75,000 students in 2 or 3 years that are looking for a home, looking for that tribe that you described, looking for a place to call home.
Looking for mobility in life. You know, people want to, I think, generally people want to succeed, and we understand that a college education is not a guarantee, but it certainly increases folks' chances to be able to live a sustainable life, and not have to struggle every day just to get by. Because if I'm a person in early recovery or not even in recovery yet, and I'm thinking, do I want to struggle in recovery or struggle like getting high and numbing myself? I'll take struggling getting high, because at least I can numb the pain.
Obvious.
But if I can see that things can get better, if I can see that future, then I think that I may be more apt to choose that future.
Yeah. When you graduated with your master's degree, what'd you do next? Did you immediately start working at Recovery Ventures?
Yeah.
You were already still there, kind of?
No. I had been gone. I actually ended up coming back, and I did an internship there for my BSW, finishing up that, to do some counseling one-on-ones and stuff like that. And then when I finished my master's degree, I started work pretty much a couple weeks after that.
They hired you right away?
Yeah.
And what's the role?
Which role? we have a pretty small staff, and so all of us wear multiple hats. Okay. But primarily, I work and do individual sessions, and do assessments for newer guys. I work primarily with the men. And then the men that are in the aftercare program or in the final phases or have graduated and are staying in our housing, I work with them very closely.
What's the program like? The 2-year program?
Probably depends on who you ask. But for me, it's a phased program. Mm-hmm. So it is really highly structured. There's 5 different phases spread out over 2 years. The initial phase is a month and a half, 2 months, and individuals come in. There's a lot of kind of structure, and you don't have a lot of free time, and you're getting kind of used to being in this environment, and kind of just learning the ropes. And then when you move through to the second phase, you get a few more freedoms. You start to pick up some responsibilities around the house because it's milieu therapy, so the community is the agent of change. And so being a part of a community, like you and I go home, I have to wash dishes and cook meals and take care of the dogs and, go out and pick the stuff out of the garden or, whatever, mow the grass. Those are responsibilities that the people in the program take care of as well after they come home from a day's work. And then there's a leadership hierarchy within the community that is really important. So as folks move through the program, they may become peer leaders, peer mentors, and so they'll help newer guys in the program kind of get started, get on their feet, help them through some tough times. And the community generally rallies around each other. And then after a year, you really start to shift more into the aftercare. What's next? Start looking at what's next. And then after 18 months, folks will go out and secure gainful employment of their own and move into transitional housing, start to go to, more meetings in the community or whatnot and get involved in things like that. And so hopefully by 2 years, they've been able to learn some new habits, work those new habits, give back to some folks and do some service, and now have 6 months of kind of practicing that outside of our 4 walls.
Yeah. And having been through that program yourself, you're probably able to kind of like navigate those waters, and I'm sure, made some pretty solid relationships in the community where you know, like, you can identify what's a good fit for certain individuals.
Yeah. We don't per se prescribe anybody to any particular type of recovery, but we encourage them to seek whatever, or if they don't know, seek different modalities of recovery, whether it be different types of meetings or religious or church groups or whatnot. We kind of encourage them to find something, and see how it works. Try it on.
Yeah. As you've kind of worked in the field for a number of years now and having graduated from App State, how has your personal recovery evolved since when you were at in that program yourself? Like,
you know, in the busy times, I do have to say my personal recovery at times was it lacked. You know, when I'm doing work full time and school full time, and all during this time, I had met and now married my wife, and so life was happening, right? And so we're, you know, I took some time to where I kind of slacked a little bit, and I could feel it. But the difference today is that when I did slack off and I felt it, I was able to find some awareness and say, you know what, I need to tighten up, and I need to get back into some practices. And my recovery has a lot of different outlets. I found paintball as an outlet, get some aggression out, play some team sport again, and it was really
I saw that on the little bio that you sent me, and I was interested in that.
And so that's something that, you know, for a few years has been a big part of my recovery. And as I did the master's degree, I had to slack off on that a little bit, but I was able to get, you know, really involved in the CRC at App State. So it's kind of taken on different forms depending on what setting that I'm in. And yeah, it's still challenging to find, you know, what feeds my soul, because I know that if I don't fill my cup up, I can't pour it out to anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's just so important to allow it to evolve and allow it to constantly change and challenge yourself and continue to grow. For the longest time, I didn't, you know, but I was I was active, but I wasn't open to other tools, other perspectives. I had what worked, and I held it tight, I held it close to me. But there's so much more out there, so much more that would foster growth.
Sure.
And allow me to, like, really become who I truly am. But I was holding on to this thing for, like, the first 2 years. Like, I just was. Yeah.
We had this guest speaker in one of my classes. It was an advocacy class. And I had really sparked this energy in becoming a vocal advocate for people in recovery, because I don't think we have enough of those out in our community to really hit at every little corner, you know, the local, the state, the national level. I think we have a lot of fantastic people that are doing that work. But in order to really combat this stigma and change some policies, we're going to need more and more and more. And so I've been feeling this, right? And this is just something that had bubbled up, and that's just how my recovery has evolved. It's gone from more of what can I get for me than to what can I get for this community of people. And this guest speaker was just talking, and she said, you know, what lights your fire will sustain you. And she's like, oh, I'm going to write that down for my next book. And I was like, yeah, you better, but I'm stealing it, right? Because that's real, man. That's real. And that's what lights my fire today, is really working with and on behalf of those of us who fight this fight every day, you know.
Where are the opportunities for advocacy work? Like, what is it criminal justice?
Sure.
Is it recovery resources? Is it access to care? Like, what?
That's a yes and.
Yes and. Yes and.
Not either or. All of the above. And
like, where do we start, I guess, is what I was.
Whatever's closest to you. For me, it started calling my representatives, like setting up an appointment. I had a representative in my local area that works in the NC state legislature who took my call, had coffee with me. We had a great conversation for an hour, and I told him about me and being a professional and a person in recovery and what it meant to me. And he listened. And I believe he listened and took it in. I'm not sure what he's done with it. But at least, you know, I was able to have that conversation. There were other representatives that didn't respond.
You didn't get a call back.
Didn't get a call back.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, those are some things that I was able to start doing. and getting involved in organizations or on a local or a regional level that just do this stuff. I don't know how to do it on my own, but there's some people already doing it that can kind of help me get in, and that, I'm just going to follow the way until I find out where to go.
Yeah, and if that gentleman gets, 20, 30, 40, 50 Jeff's calling him up for coffee,
Yeah.
he's gonna start implementing some changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we just, the best thing I can do is recover. And when I recover, then I do a little part in changing that stigma. And then if, my heart fires up for doing more and doing advocacy work, then that's what I need to do. And so any chance somebody will listen to me, I'll tell them.
Yeah. Morganton is where you live?
Yes.
Is that, where is that?
East from here, you get out to I-40 and head east. It is go through Asheville, through Marion, and Morganton is between Marion and Hickory.
Okay. Is it fairly rural like we are here?
Yeah, Morganton itself is a small little city. Not very big, but does have some downtown and some business downtown, and the rest of the county is very rural.
Yeah. So do you think that there's opportunities there just for we talk about access to care and just general needs like transportation, housing, things like that for people in recovery? Or is it the same kind of challenges that we see here, I guess?
Similar challenges, but in Morganton they have started a public transit recently, which is awesome. Some regular bus routes. They have some housing that may be appropriate for people in recovery, but I'm not sure as far as sober living houses. There's only a couple little programs down there that house very few people, so they need more of that. We need more of that everywhere. But yeah, there's a group of folks called the Burke Substance Abuse Network that meet, and I've just recently connected with someone to try to start meeting with them. I hear they're doing awesome work down there, and so now that I'm living in that community, I want to be a part of that and see what that's about.
I mean, where we live right here, everything's so spread out as far as the resources, even county to county. If you get a DUI over in Cherokee, you're going to Franklin, or you're going to Waynesville, or you're coming here in Jackson County to, do your counseling classes to get your license back. Well, how do you expect somebody to do that? It's little things like that. That's just everything's so spread out, but our population is also so low that I don't know if the answer is to put programs in each community because it's such a rural community. I don't know if it would be sustainable long term. So I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, it's tough. That's a good question. I think we can do as much as we can. I think sustainability is something that we got to look at. In a rural setting, it's difficult because, if you just got a DUI and you lost your license, now you've got to drive 45 minutes to the closest counseling place that does DUI classes, and that's going to be difficult.
It's a recipe for disaster, man.
Yeah.
When'd you get married?
Got married 2 years ago.
Yeah,
it's been a fantastic journey. My wife she's not in recovery, but she is my biggest ally.
Yeah. Meeting her, dating in recovery,
I just
being somebody who
was open from the beginning and said, this is who I am.
Being somebody who has always felt like an outsider, kind of did you find that part of it challenging? Did you?
Really, I have found nothing about being in a relationship with my wife to be challenging.
All right.
And maybe we'll have, those types of challenges at some point, but I think from the beginning we were both very authentic and real and open to one another, and that has made the biggest difference. By far the most healthy relationship I've ever had, and I think that was a product of being in recovery and being in a good place in my recovery, and she helps me to stay there.
Living by those values that you set for yourself.
Absolutely.
And holding up to that. Father?
Yes, I have a daughter who is now 21, and unlike what I thought might happen, I thought I might get paid back for all my crap that I put my parents through. I did not. She's been a fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better person to be around. She inspires me way more than I probably inspire her.
She a college student?
She is, and she's still trying to kind of find her own path as far as the degree and getting through school. And she's kind of changed her mind a few times, which is natural. I mean, when I was 21, I had no idea where I was going, but yeah. She's making way better decisions at 21 than I did, so that's fantastic.
She's older, so she was, a young adult when you kind of started a lot of the changes in your life.
She was 13 when I got in recovery this time, and I remember her not wanting to talk to me right before that, and that hurt me to the core. I always thought that would be there, and when I saw what I had done, how it had really affected, I think that was eye-opening, and I didn't ever want to go back there. And so today our relationship's really open and honest, and I'm able to, we're not only father and daughter. We're friends. We can talk to each other about things, and I feel safe with her, and I think she feels safe with me. So that's a blessing of recovery, because I don't think I would have that today if I didn't have recovery.
Yeah. Are you still active in the 12-step community?
Not as much. I still attend some 12-step meetings, but I am currently kind of searching for a transition. It's difficult being a professional in the field and being involved in 12-step meetings on a local basis. So yeah, I'm kind of in a transition phase in that myself. I kind of used that CRC last school year to really feed my recovery, and this year is going to be a year of change and growth again, and some new environments and new settings.
Well, you mentioned, I think, somewhere evolving your spirituality and kind of opening to maybe some new perspectives or investigating.
Yeah, I think spiritually speaking, I'm a person of faith, and my faith has evolved. And my openness to the value of other faiths has evolved, and so and other perspectives, and so I really enjoy learning about someone else's journey into spirituality and how that helps them, because as a person in recovery, I think anything that can help me is going to be good. So I try to be very open-minded about my experience and about other people's experiences.
Yeah, very important. Again, like same thing. I did the same. I was very, very fixed on my views, and just being around people like Caleb, being around people like Richie, and kind of like understanding what their faith has brought to them in their life. Has really opened me up to other perspectives and allowed me to have conversations that I wouldn't have had a couple years ago. And though I still practice what works for me, I really try to investigate what are you guys doing? I want some of that. Let me get some of that. Like that's working here. This is working for me. Let me give you a little bit of this, and kind of like share these practices and share these beliefs, and kind of not try to control it so much, and just kind of allow myself to investigate what is going on, what's happening, how can I apply this to my life.
I think that's something that has allowed me to kind of, when I investigate other things with an open mind, then I let my heart do the pointing rather than my head.
Yeah.
And so that's been the biggest shift, is like I could be a book quoter, whether it be recovery books or spiritual books or this, and I was always able to do that because that was simple to me. That was easy, and that a lot of times for me was expressed solely through my mind and not as much through my heart. And today I think like learning how to express my faith through my heart, how I express it, because that's personal to me, and so that's been a big thing. It's been freeing to not be kind of caught in the semantics of faith rather and actually be experiencing faith.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah,
big difference in the two. Family man, right?
Yeah.
Husband, father, graduate. What does Jeff do for fun? Like, how do you?
I found gardening the last few years, so I grow vegetables. The gardening, we had a little apartment in Mars Hill when I was up there, and the landlord let me put a little 10-foot by 10-foot garden in one summer, and I grew a few tomatoes and like a couple squash plants or something, and the tomatoes did really well, not because I took care of them, just because
they do well.
I was really lucky, and but I learned a lot of stuff, and I really enjoyed going out there. Man, I spent as much time in that 10 by 10 garden as I do in my giant garden now, like every day, because that was just that thing that soothed me, that helped me to get away from the world and focus and center and nurture something else, and not have to talk to it. And that was important to me. And, I could just be there in that environment. And that's been a huge part of my recovery. That's a huge part of not just my recovery, it's a huge part of my wellness,
Just living.
Yeah, just living, man. And I've, paintball was, for a few years, a really, really big part.
What does that look like? Like, what exactly are you doing? You go hitting the courses with like your buddies? You're on a team? Like what?
Yeah, So this past year, I took a year off of competitive paintball, but for the past 4 years or 5 years before that, I was, I had found paintball, and the first day I went out, I was like, I'm hooked. This is it. And I was out on the course with a lot of players that were kind of weekend warrior, just rec players, and, dipping in and out of the woods and all that good stuff. And that was fun. But then I found a style of paintball called airball, or they call it speedball, which in our world is a little bit different. It's a little bit different. And it's more of a team sport that is regulated, has rules. It's on a smaller field with kind of blow-up air bunkers, and they're mirrored on each side, and it's like 3-on-3 or 5-on-5, and you start and it's timed and it's fast, and paintballs are coming out of the guns at like 10 balls per second, so it's really flying. It's a lot of adrenaline, and nobody's going to get killed, and it's really safe. And so, but learning that teamwork, learning those skills again, it took me back to high school when I was playing ball, and I was, in a better place in my life, and it just helped me to be back in that place for that period of time, and I could forget the world, right? And I was just there with me and my teammates, and be normal. That was a huge experience, and then being able to travel around to tournaments and play and have some success and have some failures, but do it together and have fun, and it was a great experience, and I look forward to hopefully next year getting back into more competitive playing.
Yeah, that sounds like a ton of fun, right?
Yeah, it is, and we've taken some of our clients to play paintball recently, and so that was a really fun experience to see some guys try something that they haven't done in recovery, and and I think it fits recovery too, because we like adrenaline, we like that excitement, and it feeds that part of us in a healthy way.
Yeah, a healthy way, and like you said, like the teamwork, the camaraderie, like the competitiveness that we all have, it covers all of those bases.
And at the end of the day, haven't stolen anything,
Yeah.
and when nobody's chasing us and all that good stuff.
We
So yeah,
make it home safe.
yeah.
What is next
Mm.
for Jeff?
I often wonder what's next. I spend a lot of time on my commutes to work and back, kind of what's the next step. I mean, I'm pretty happy with where I am career-wise and working with, the community that I work with and the program that I work with. Personally and beyond that in my recovery, I think really finding a way to be more of an advocate, to try to reach folks that need to be reached, the decision makers that make decisions on our behalf, often without our voice being heard. I think that is something, the social justice part of it, the criminal justice part of it, being able to help students get financial aid, being able to help folks that have been incarcerated get housing, get jobs without that stuff being held against them, and that's I don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to come together, but that's where I want to be. I want to be in the middle of that.
Yeah. So many of those issues are on like a federal scale. That's like, it's like, where do you start?
I think we start on the local level.
Yeah, and just push it.
Like what here in Waynesville,
The LEAD
the
program.
LEAD program, down in Nashville, the HOPE initiative. Those are some local programs that kind of defy the federal, system type approach that are working. And so trying
they have the data to justify it.
Build more of that stuff and be on the on that team moving forward.
Well, I work like I asked that because I work like a little part-time job at local department store, and I've always worked retail my entire life, and I did that because that's where I learned like those social skills that were missing in my real life, because I had to talk to customers, I had to build relationships with them, I had to earn their trust, I had to earn the trust of my employees who worked for me. So I kind of like developed those skills in the retail world. And so like I have like a managerial type position over there, but part-time. And, one of the things that I've been trying to do is like, we're always hiring. We're always hiring like seasonal, especially right now it's Christmas. Like we just hired like 8 or 10 new associates. And so like I've been talking that up with people that I know who are looking for jobs. And young kid, here we go, kid again, young kid, that I've been working with here on campus, involved in our collegiate recovery programs, looking for a job, get them an interview, completely honest, upfront with them, talk with our manager, talking about his recovery, talking about the things that he's doing, talking about his goals in his career, and she's completely like on board with hiring folks in recovery. However, it's a national corporation.
Yeah.
So we go through the hiring process, love the dude, send off the background check, and corporate
says no.
Yeah. It's like, what do? We got awesome candidate right here. Like we struggled to find folks because it's low wage, low pay. Like it's not a career. It's not a livable wage. Right, so it's difficult to find people. We got a prime candidate right here, and our hands are tied, completely tied. I don't know what to do.
We've got to work our way up that system, right? And we've got to prove it wrong, right? We've got to prove the stigma wrong. And individually, I think that's part of our responsibility. Not everybody needs to go talk to their legislature. That might not be what everybody's pull on their heart is, but I think as individuals in recovery, I have a responsibility to prove the dadgum stigma wrong. Yeah. Like every day, I'm going to live something different than what the world thinks about me. Because what I know about stereotypes is they're not all true. What I know about
rarely are they true.
And to generalize an entire population for any characteristic that you see as common is ludicrous. So for us to prove those stereotypes wrong is going to be huge, because on an individual basis, on a local basis, as we're interacting in our local retail store or our local college or in our legislation, or we're getting elected to town council or whatever, you know, that's showing that recovery works and people do change. And so I think that it's a very micro issue and a very macro issue at the same time. And where I fit into that, I have no idea. But, you know, like doing this, like saying yes to things like this is a huge part of me fulfilling my responsibility.
I think a part of that responsibility we need to step outside of our circles. Yeah. Because I have these conversations all the time with my tribe, with my crew, with my people. Guess what?
We're preaching to the choir.
We're preaching to the choir. You know, I gotta get a hold of my congressman. Yeah. I do have these conversations. I talk to my customers at work about it. I hand them a business card about the podcast, and 9 times out of 10, when I do that, it's like it's a department store. The typical demographic of our customer base is female, 55 to 70. It's an older, you know, local crowd, and so I'll say it. I'm a person in long-term recovery. This is what I do. I'm in school, studying human services and substance abuse treatment, and I have this podcast, and I'll give them the information and share it with them. And like 9 times out of 10, they're like, "Oh, you know, my nephew," and it starts a conversation.
My son, my grandson,
my nephew,
my daughter, and we hear that all the time.
But it's like more of us collectively having those conversations outside of these people that we know, and more in the community.
Well, and this human interaction thing helps us to change our mind a bit. And so when they put a face to it, when my face is there and they look at me and then I say I'm a person in long-term recovery, they've already made the first impression, judgment of me, and most of the time people tell me I have a trusting face. Yeah. Well, one time that was it worked in my favor in not so good a way. So today I hope it can work in my favor to help me promote that recovery is real, it works, and you know what? Yeah, I don't look like I used to. I don't look like that person that used to do the things that I did. I'm a new person. And recovery has made that possible, and it's not because I do anything special. I'm not a superhero. I don't think that I've done anything that the other 23 million or so people in America that are in recovery do. I just want to, if we have this personal relationship with somebody that's not in our tribe or not in our choir, then we can change the image.
Yeah. I think kind of connecting ourselves and attaching ourselves with organizations that do support it, like the way that they have here at SCC, and finding out where the opportunities are within these organizations. Because of and I don't even know how this happened, but because of the work that we've been doing the last semester, I was approached in October to be interviewed, if I was interested to be interviewed for the student representative on the board of trustees on campus, right? And I went through the interview process. Myself and another student interviewed with the president of the school. It's more of a student information type position. We don't get a vote. Yeah. You get to sit in on all the meetings and you kind of share your perspective. They want a student's point of view on issues that they're voting on and discussing, but you don't get an actual vote. But you get to share these things. And I got the position.
That's awesome.
And so they kind of approached me because of stuff like this and because of the work that we're doing on campus. They saw that I was doing what you said and taking that leadership type role and hey, we're going to do this here, right? We are going to support recovery. We're going to support mental health. We're going to support our students in whatever walk of life they're at. We're going to support them. So now I have an opportunity to go in front of the board. Next week's our first meeting.
That's awesome.
And talk about these things and like have these conversations and talk about the things that we're doing. And like, you know, they're getting ready to break ground on a new health sciences building. So what do you think I'm going to be advocating for over there?
Man, this
Yes.
and a safe space on campus
space
that is
for
dedicated for CRCs.
You got it, bro.
Yeah,
You got it.
absolutely.
Stuff like that. Opportunities that never would have come to me
Yeah.
had I not used my voice to tell those stories, to talk to the, you know, every single day I see the dean of students, I see the president of the school, I say hi, I let them know what I'm doing because they're interested in what's going on. They
Yeah.
want students to talk to them, you know. I tell them what I'm doing. I'm telling, like, the president was sat downstairs Wednesday for like 45 minutes with myself and another student from the CRC, and it was just like shooting the shit, hanging out. And
Yeah.
we were talking about, he was like asking us about the meditation group, and he was like interested in coming and participating and stuff like that. And he's like, he has interest in the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
So like attaching ourselves into these organizations that are interested in helping in the ways that they can, and then seeing what resources are available.
And they don't all have to be recovery organizations. Like, yeah, they need to be. We need to have a diverse group of folks that are allies of recovery. I think that's huge. Man, that you got the president wanting to come to the meditation group. That's amazing.
And there's like, me and him have had private conversations because he's like, you know, I don't know. He wants to come to see it. But he doesn't know what type of influence that would have on like the other participants and what his role is, if it would be like a good fit, or if like we like talked about like, hey guys, next Wednesday I just want you to know that you know is going to be in attendance. We do have faculty does participate.
That's awesome.
In a few of our support groups, like we have not closed it off to students. We do have faculty members who attend regularly.
That is
already.
amazing.
But again, just like turnover, we keep circling back.
And what
to
we
that
know is that students in recovery do well. Like, there's not a huge database that of collegiate recovery programs like as a whole. They're starting to do that. There is some data beginning to be on a bigger scale, but on local or individual school research, some of these programs that have been around a while are showing increased graduation rates, increased GPAs, higher than normal, higher than your average student. So these students that people had written off 4 or 5 years ago because they were in their addiction, now they're in recovery and they're outperforming their peers.
They're your most successful students.
It's amazing. So why not support that?
Yeah, absolutely. Got any interest in politics, man? Putting your name in the hat?
You know, I've had several people over the past year ask me that, and the short answer is I don't know. It's complicated.
Just do exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Start at the local level. And
I think locally it might be something that I would want to pursue. It's also something that I have to weigh the cost of family.
time.
In on that, time and the energy that would be necessary. So I don't know. I want to be involved politically for advocacy. I'm not sure that I want a career as a lawmaker. That sounds that
sounds like a politician.
It sounds like too big of a sacrifice. It sounds like and there's also the stigma, you know. That does attach some fear to that. Like, when I'm exposed to the entire community, how are they going to react to that? Even though it's the thing that I want to fight the most.
Yeah, and just in this past election cycle, we've seen a wave of change.
Yeah.
We've seen females get elected across the country, Muslims, homosexuals, like
way more diverse.
Very more diverse.
It was, I think somebody said it was a rainbow wave rather than a blue wave. And that's huge, man. We need representation from every group, every walk of life. No matter what your political leanings are, we need to hear different perspectives. You know, I'm good with disagreement. I'm good with open debate. What I'm not good with is not including everybody in that discussion.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of like why I do this podcast, because I used to not be good with debate.
Yeah.
Right. I used to not even want to have those conversations. And now I come to it with a sense of curiosity. Like, I want to know why you think the way that you do. I want to know why you look at the world the way that you do. Where can we meet in the middle? Is there something that I'm missing?
Yeah.
Like, I want to come to it with a learning, from a point of view of like a learning opportunity. Whether I, in the end of the day, agree with you or not, there's something that I can learn from that conversation.
Sure, I think there's something we can learn from everybody.
I
can learn a lot from you. You can learn a lot from me, even whether we're on the same side of the spectrum or not. And I think I think we have this polarized system right now rather than a spectrum system of politics. And I like to think that most of us live somewhere other than the polls. Yeah. So I think there's definitely that room for that compromise, that room for teaching each other rather than fighting each other.
Awesome, man. I'm going to let you run.
Awesome.
It's getting to be about time. It's 11:30.
Wow, this is going by really quick.
Did it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jeff's going over to Western Carolina University to help facilitate what kind of things do they talk about? What are you guys going to be?
So this training is going to be a bit about tobacco prevention, and we also have a guest speaker coming in, Brian Coons from Pavilion.
Brian Coons?
Yeah.
Oh man, did you tell him that you were coming here today?
I did not.
Oh, me and him had a conversation like as soon as we did the summit last week.
Oh wow, yeah.
We had a conversation back and forth about getting him on the podcast, and also I just wanted to like pick his brain a little bit.
I just met him last week.
Did you?
For the first time,
but
I've heard a lot of great things.
Yeah.
And so he's going to talk about how they implemented a no smoking policy, a smoking cessation policy there in their growing pains in their treatment center.
Okay.
And kind of, we're going to. I don't know everything that the presenters are going to present, but these are some folks that are experts in their area.
Dang,
and
man!
They're going to give us some good stuff.
I should have taken the day off from work.
Yeah.
I got to like literally leave here and go over to the store. It's our busiest week of the year because Black Friday's on Friday.
Yep.
And so, Black Friday is on Friday. However, in this day and age in the retail world,
your Black Friday sale starts way early.
Yeah. And to the point where, like, we're open on Thanksgiving. I'm working 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Thanksgiving. But I think, like, the big Black Friday sale starts officially, like, Tuesday or Monday. But, like, they're doing stuff, like, every weekend they're doing stuff. So it's just pure madness over there. Like, the customers are buying into it, and it's just very time-consuming. Looking forward to the day where I no longer have to go back to that. It's like my comfort zone. Yeah. Because I did it for so long, and I'm good at it, and so like, even though I do like I don't financially like I don't have to have a large amount of income to survive. Like my house is paid for. I just really have like basic simple bills. Yeah. But it's just something that I'm kind of like holding on to. It's like my comfort zone, my safety net. Like if all this doesn't work out, I could always fall back on that. But it's like you said, like that awareness. Like I'm clearly aware of it. Yeah. And over the last year, I've like slowly began to let go of it a little bit to the point where I only work like 2 days a week.
And taking these risks is they are risky, but they're also super rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I'm passionate about, this right here. Doing this podcast, doing as many podcasts as we can, just have as many conversations, meeting people like you. We just happen to be recording it. We haven't made a penny off of it in 8 months, and it's a lot of, like, hours, but I'm willing to put in the time. All my effort goes into this, to the point where, like, I'm, like, probably should be spending more time on my schoolwork than I actually am.
What lights our fire sustains us.
You know it, brother. You know it. So, Jeff, you are a badass. I appreciate you coming
Same
over
to
and
you.
hanging with us. Got any closing words or anything? How can people find you if they want to hit you up? Instagram?
So I'm on Facebook.
Facebook? Okay.
Yep, Jeff Hunsunker. You'll probably find me there. And if people do want to hit me up or ask some questions, I'm always open to some good conversation. And I'm open to meeting new people and new experiences. So let's take this thing and spread the word.
Awesome, man. I look forward to taking it and spreading the word with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love to have you back again, too. Maybe
Thank you.
we'll connect sometime.
Sure.
In the very near future. Thank you guys for listening to NCRAW, North Carolina Recovery Always. Want to give a shout out to today's musical contributor, Rival, whose work can be found by searching Rival 727 on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Facebook. Visit our website at www.ncraw.life to subscribe to the website, to subscribe to the podcast and receive it delivered directly to your inbox every time we post an episode. We send them out to subscribers 12 to 24 hours before the general public has access to it. So thank you guys for tuning in.